To a global witness, I followed your activities, reports on Liberia. There are quite one or two of which I saw for the first time today on your. We will be interested in having access to such. But if you were to estimate how much in total was accumulated through the illegal diamond and timber trade, in distinction or in contradistinction to the damage, ecological damage sustained by local communities, what would you put the figures at?
A figure in dollars?
Yes, in dollars.
It's a question I can't honestly answer. That doesn't mean I'll answer it dishonestly. I don't know the figures, but we're talking extremely substantial figures, so that the last figures we're actually able to put together in a concrete way in terms of the value of timber exported that I mentioned before was $187 million in 2000. My guess is that would be an increased number in 2001, probably a further increased number in 2002. So we're looking at $600–700 million perhaps. I'm just extrapolating, but the trade was increasing, OTC was getting more efficient, the Chinese were buying more. I think in 2003 maybe, well, it would certainly have declined, A, because of sanctions, and B, because Taylor was losing control of forested areas. In terms of the relationship between that trade and the Liberian people, I think completely devastating on a variety of counts. One of which is what happened when the timber operations were actually going on, because they weren't conducted in any recognized sustainable way. And so there were numerous reports of timber companies shifting villages to one side, driving roads through people's gardens, the establishment of brothels in the timber concessions, which took in young women from the local area. So kind of local taboos were being affected, HIV began to be spread. Obviously the loss of natural capital to Liberia, because I saw a document yesterday, for example, relating to the current round of concessions, and one timber company, Rougier, who I mentioned, who I don't think should be allowed to come here anyway, but nevertheless, they had inspected some concessions, I can't remember exactly where, but I think up north, and said, well, they've already been harvested. So in terms of Liberia trying to sell concessions to timber companies now, well, you're still suffering and will be suffering for many years to come the legacy of what happened to the natural environment during that period.
In your presentation, you displayed some letters signed by the then Deputy Minister for Revenues, Juanita Neal, authorizing the transfer of $2 million and other sums of money into the personal account of Charles Taylor. Are there reasons for us to believe that such arrangements were done outside of the normal banking sector, like through the central bank that is supposed to regulate the flow, the inflows and outflows of money within the Liberian economy?
It seemed to us, looking at the documents we have, and I would hasten to add we don't have all of the documents, that like another one I showed was Gus Kernhoven, who owed a certain amount in taxes. I think it was $250,000 around about on one particular occasion. But rather than remitting those taxes to the Ministry of Finance or the central bank, he remitted them to Hotel Africa, which he happened to own. And so I think it was a completely, how would I describe it, ad hoc way of passing money around. It certainly it broke through any kind of legal, conventional methods of money transfers within a government. So if it suited, but for example, OTC might receive a letter, and I'm talking about a real example now, where they received a letter saying, rather than transferring $500,000 in taxes to the central bank, transfer it to Sanjavan Rupra, a known arms dealer, in return for a helicopter. So timber companies have been instructed by the government not to pay the taxes to the government, but simply to pay that money to someone who's selling, arms in that particular instance.
Now, are there reasons to believe that these officials who collaborated in such schemes may have received kickbacks?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Do you believe, or should we have reasons to believe that those Liberian government officials who were involved in such schemes, the transfer of funds outside of the regular banking arrangement, are there reasons for us to believe that these officials may have received kickbacks for the cooperation to facilitate such arrangements? Although some have categorically denied that there were any personal gain or benefit accruing to their persons.
I would be surprised if they hadn't received kickbacks. I think people in high government position during that period were probably doing quite well for themselves. I don't have proof of that in every case, but I'm sure they were receiving kickbacks. I also think it's just to develop that question a bit in the case of Juanita Neal, who has denied certainly any wrongdoing. The same documents I saw yesterday talking about Rougier, this French company, who bought incidentally from Charles Taylor before he was president, in the First Liberian Civil War, and they're a big French reputable timber company. Their agent, if you like, in Liberia, they're represented by a company called the Jaffane Consortium, which is run by Juanita Neal. So there's a continuum here, I think.